It was supposed to be a normal Friday night. The kind where the clatter of cutlery and low hum of conversation filled the air, and no one noticed the quiet man at the back, the one in the wheelchair. But by the end of the night, that same man would leave the room in stunned silence, and one man, the owner, would be left staring at the door, pale, shaken, and completely undone. Because the man they all dismissed wasn't who they thought he was. And by the time they learned the truth, it would be too late to take it back. The restaurant was called Le Chateau du Soleil, not because it needed to be, but because its owner believed that names mattered more than service. Martin Delacroix was a man who wore wealth like a weapon, polished, proud, and painfully unkind. He didn't own the restaurant to feed people. He owned it to exclude them. His motto? No distractions, no exceptions. And by distractions, he meant anyone who didn't look like his elite clientele. So when the hostess hesitated as she approached his table during peak hours, Martin's eyes sharpened. "What is it now, Elise?" "There's someone at the door, sir. He's asking for a table." Martin raised an eyebrow. "And?" Elise looked down. "He's in a wheelchair." Martin groaned. "Tell him it's a full house. Or better yet, tell him we don't serve those who block the aisles." "Sir, he's polite. He said he'd wait." Martin stood. "I'll handle it." The man at the entrance sat calmly, hands folded, posture upright. His chair was sleek, modern, nothing invasive, but still, it was all Martin could see. He approached with a practiced smile and a cold heart. "I'm afraid we're fully booked tonight," he said. The man tilted his head. "Your website said walk-ins were welcome before 8 p.m. Martin leaned in, his voice barely polite. "And we welcome walk-ins who can walk in." The words hung in the air like poison. A couple nearby overheard and turned their heads. The man in the chair didn't flinch. He just nodded. "I understand," he said softly. Then added, "I'll just watch from the window. I came a long way." Martin scoffed. "That won't be necessary." He turned and walked back in without another glance. In the shadows of the dining room, Leo, a junior waiter with only 3 months on the job, saw everything. His hands clenched around the tray of sparkling water. He'd grown up watching his mother fight for every inch of dignity after losing her leg to a factory accident. Watching Martin shame that man who had said nothing wrong, asked for nothing special, made something inside him burn. He passed a glass of wine to a guest, then leaned over to Elise at the front desk. "Did you get his name?" She nodded. He signed the wait list. It says, Mr. James W. Hart. Leo froze. No, it couldn't be. On his break, Leo slipped into the staff lounge, pulled out his phone, and typed into the search bar, James W. Hart, Disability Tech. The first article made his heart race. James W. Hart, former CEO of Neural Limb Technologies, advocate, philanthropist, multi-millionaire. Leo scrolled further. Hart had lost the use of his legs 10 years ago in a car crash caused by a drunk driver. Instead of retreating, he'd poured his fortune into designing affordable, state-of-the-art mobility devices, including the very kind of wheelchair he was sitting in. And now, he was being turned away by a man who had no idea who he was humiliating. Later that evening, Leo pulled Martin aside. "Sir, I think you should know." Martin raised a hand. "If this is about the beggar in the lobby, save it." "He's not a beggar," Leo replied. "His name is James W. Hart." Martin blinked. "And I should care because..." Leo stepped closer, lowering his voice. "He's a tech giant. He funds diversity in tech. He's worth more than this entire block." Martin smirked. "Then he can afford to eat somewhere else." And with that, he walked off. Just before closing, the restaurant began to settle. Napkins folded, tables cleared, and then the door opened. Mr. Hart returned. Not alone. With him were 2 women, one with a camera, the other with a discreet badge clipped to her blouse. "Good evening," he said, calm as ever. Martin appeared instantly, his face tight. "I believe I told you." The woman with the badge interrupted. "Mr. Delacroix, my name is Angela Rains. I'm with the National Accessibility Standards Board." Martin stiffened. James Hart continued. "You see, Le Chateau du Soleil recently applied for a government partnership grant. It includes clauses about equal access." The woman held up a file. "Tonight's events will be submitted in full." Martin stuttered, "This is a misunderstanding." James held up a hand. "It's not. I wasn't here to dine." He paused. "I was here to inspect." A silence fell over the entire room. Some patrons clapped quietly. Others looked away, ashamed. Leo stood off to the side, smiling faintly, and Mr. Hart wasn't finished. He rolled forward directly to Martin. I came here hoping you'd treat me like any other customer, he said. Instead, you treated me like less than human. Martin swallowed. And that's the real problem. Angela Raines handed Martin a notice. Your grant is suspended pending investigation. Mr. Hart turned to leave. But just before he did, a waiter ran in, breathless. Sir, Mr. Hart, there's someone outside who says he knows you. Says he's been trying to find you for over a decade. James's calm demeanor cracked slightly. What did he say his name was? The waiter hesitated. He said to tell you, Brandon lives. James froze. The camera zooms in on his face. He drops his phone. His lips tremble. Brandon? James sat frozen in the back seat of his town car, the words echoing in his mind. Brandon lived. He turned to Angela Raines, still seated beside him. I need to know who that man is. Now, Angela grabbed her phone and relayed the request to the staff inside the restaurant. James clenched his fists. That name, he hadn't heard it in 12 years. And for good reason. Because Brandon was supposed to be dead. 12 years earlier, James was not a CEO. He was a teacher, a mentor at a youth rehab center on the city's east side. That's where he met Brandon Keller, a troubled, brilliant teenager with a mind built for code and a heart weighed down by grief. James took him in, not legally, but spiritually. They shared meals, built computers, laughed, until the night of the fire. The building collapsed. Brandon was reported dead. James never forgave himself for leaving him behind. Until now. Inside the restaurant, the man who delivered the message stood quietly by the door, his baseball cap pulled low. Leo approached him. Who are you? The man lifted his head slowly. I'm the reason he's still alive, he said. Leo blinked. You know, Mr. Hart, I knew Brandon. I was there the night it all went wrong, and I've been looking for James ever since. He handed Leo a USB drive. Give him this. He'll understand. James sat in his apartment, hands trembling as he inserted the drive. A video opened. At first, only static. Then, a boy's face, older now, scarred, but unmistakable. Brandon, if you're watching this, it means I found you. I survived, James. The fire didn't take me, but the system did. They buried me in paperwork and red tape. I've lived off the grid for over a decade. I never stopped watching you. Your rise, your speeches, your wheelchairs. And now, I need your help. James leaned in. I have something they want. Something that could destroy everything they built. The screen glitched, then cut to black. Back at the restaurant, Martin poured himself a glass of scotch, hands shaking. He stared at the cease and desist letter from Angela Raines. James Hart, he muttered, of all people. Suddenly, his private phone rang. A voice spoke from the other end, calm and clipped. We saw the incident tonight. You made a mess. Martin stiffened. Who is this? Let's just say, we've worked with your investors before. Hart is a problem, and that USB drive he received, that's going to cost you everything, unless you help us retrieve it. Martin's heart dropped. What do you want me to do? The voice smiled. Just keep playing host. He'll be back. The next morning, James returned to the restaurant. Not as a customer, not as a critic, but as a man with questions. Leo greeted him at the door. I know who you are, he said quietly, and I think you saved someone I loved. James raised an eyebrow. My brother Leo added, he was in a chair like yours, and he always said someone gave him hope once. I think that was you. James softened. Sometimes, hope is all we have. Then he stepped inside, and at a corner table, waiting quietly, was Brandon. James approached slowly, barely able to speak. Brandon. The young man stood, arms tense at his sides. I thought you were dead, James whispered. Brandon nodded. I was supposed to be. Then he stepped forward and hugged James tight. The room faded. The years faded. But just as James pulled back, Brandon's face changed. There's something you need to see, he said. He pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table. Inside, documents, financial transfers, shell corporations, blueprints. James's eyes widened. This is, Brandon nodded, the real source of your funding. The company that backed your wheelchair tech? It's a front. James went pale. Front for what? Brandon's voice lowered. A biomedical weapons lab. You've been helping them without even knowing. James looked up and behind Brandon saw Martin watching from a security feed. He was already calling someone. And the final screen of the folder blinked with a warning. Confidential Patient 6 prototype mobility. Chip test scheduled for activation. The name below, Brandon Keller. James whispered, They're using you. Brandon's voice cracked. They already did. James stared at the files on the table, disbelief tightening around his throat. It didn't make sense. The chip he'd helped develop, the technology that earned awards, saved lives, was now linked to neural control research, rapid response testing, and prototype compliance systems. I never signed off on this, James whispered. I never would have allowed it. Brandon's eyes didn't blink. You didn't have to. He pulled another document from the folder. It was signed by your silent partner, the one who made the first investment in Neuralim. James took the page and froze. Martin Delacroix. James remembered it clearly now. A decade ago, just after the crash, he was broke, paralyzed, desperate to bring his vision to life. Then came Martin. I believe in what you're doing, Martin had said, but innovation needs funding. Leave the details to me. James had been so focused on building again, he never asked what the cost was. And now that cost had a name, Brandon. Meanwhile, Martin sat at his desk in the upper lounge of Le Chateau du Soleil, pacing furiously as he reviewed the surveillance footage of James and Brandon. Get me the file, he barked into the phone. The experimental data on subject 6. Yes, and delete anything linking him to Hart. But I said delete it. A silence. Then, sir, there's a problem. What now? The file's been cloned. It's already circulating in the anonymous cloud. Martin turned pale. They're going public. Back in James's loft, Brandon lifted his shirt, revealing a small scar beneath his collarbone. James flinched. They told me it was a pacemaker, Brandon said. But it's not. It's a regulator. Neural frequency based. They were testing emotional dampening, memory wipes, behavioral control. James's voice cracked. How long have you known? Since the night I woke up in that lab, still alive after the fire you thought killed me. Brandon's hands trembled. I wanted to hate you. For walking away. For forgetting me. I didn't forget, but I understand now, Brandon whispered, because you were being used too. That evening, Leo, the waiter from the restaurant, returned to the kitchen to close up. As he gathered his belongings, he knocked over a tray behind the wine cellar wall. And there it was, a hidden lens. Blinking. He traced the cable to a back room rarely used, once Martin's private tasting room. Inside, he found a hard drive, plugged it into his laptop, and what he saw chilled him. Footage of multiple people in wheelchairs entering the restaurant over the past year and being turned away. Facial recognition data, notes, labels, potential test subjects. Leo whispered, "Oh my God, this place isn't just a restaurant." The next morning, James prepared a press release. He decided to host a live virtual conference revealing everything, the data, the experiments, the truth behind Neuralim's funding. We go live at 8 p.m., James told Brandon. I'm with you, Brandon said. James paused. You don't have to do this. Brandon shook his head. They took my voice for years. It's time I used it again. But across town, Martin was already one step ahead. A black SUV pulled up beside James's apartment building that afternoon. Two men stepped out, dressed in delivery uniforms. One pressed the intercom. Package for James Hart. James buzzed them in. Seconds later, Brandon looked up from his laptop. Did you order something? No. They opened the door and were met with tasers. Everything went black. James woke first, strapped to a chair, groggy. The room was cold. Fluorescent lights buzzed above. A monitor flickered on. Martin appeared on the screen. You should have taken the humiliation quietly. Now you'll learn what silence really means. Brandon's voice echoed from the next room, faint but rising in panic. James strained against his restraints. The screen changed to a biometric readout. Brandon's heart rate, brainwaves, signal pattern. Beginning phase 2 testing. Subject 6, reactivation in process. James screamed, "No, don't touch him." The camera zoomed in on Brandon's terrified face as the device beneath his skin began to glow faintly. The walls of the chamber were slick with condensation, the cold hissing from vents that made James's skin prickle. He struggled against the straps, still groggy from whatever drug they'd used to sedate him. Through a one-way glass wall, he could see Brandon. Slumped in a chair, wires connected to his spine, his temples, his heart. The glow beneath his skin pulsed, faster, sharper. "Brandon," James shouted. "Fight it! You're stronger than they think." No response. A speaker crackled above James's head. Martin's voice came through, smug and cold. "Funny, isn't it? The man who gave hope to millions is the same man who built their leash." James gritted his teeth. "You lied to me! You used him!" Martin chuckled. "No, I perfected him. And now, he's our proof of concept. The monitor displayed a line of clone subjects, each with Brandon's facial structure, each labeled with a code. James stared in horror. You cloned him? Not exactly. We enhanced his template, turned pain into obedience. And now, we get to sell that obedience to the highest bidder. Meanwhile, back at James's tech HQ, Zoe, his former assistant, and Leo, the young waiter from the restaurant, pieced together the GPS trail from the delivery van. Leo slammed his palm against the desk. They took him to Blackridge Compound, that's a decommissioned biolab, under a shell corporation. Zoe stood. Then we're going there. Leo grabbed a flash drive. What is that? Zoe's voice hardened. Proof. The full experiment logs, footage of the humiliation, everything. We leak this, and no one will protect Martin again. They headed for the door. They saved us once, Zoe said. Now it's our turn. Inside the chamber, Brandon's eyes fluttered open. Lights danced in front of his face. Synthetic voices echoed. Override protocol initiating. Emotion suppressed. Identity clearance. Subject 6. He blinked. But in the fog, he saw James's reflection through the glass. James, he mumbled. Alarms beeped faster. Memory breach. System instability detected. James slammed his fist against the glass. You're not a machine. You're not Subject 6. You're Brandon Keller. And you're not alone. A single tear rolled down Brandon's cheek. Override failing. Neural autonomy returning. The system lights flashed. Brandon screamed, and then went still. In a sleek boardroom above the facility, Martin met with two men in suits. One slid a briefcase across the table. We'll take 5 prototypes, no conscience, no memory. Martin nodded. You'll have demonstration footage by tonight. But the buyer smirked. We already have it. He turned to screen. It played footage of Brandon flinching as wires pulsed, but it wasn't a test video. It was a live feed, and it was being recorded by someone else. Back in the server room, an unmarked terminal lit up. An anonymous figure in a hoodie typed rapidly. Monitors across the lab began glitching. Files unlocked. Doors disengaged. And a message appeared on James's screen. You built the cage. Now break it. Ghost! James looked up. His restraints clicked open. The door to Brandon's chamber hissed. James limped inside, grabbing his old friend. Come on, Brandon, come back to me. Brandon's lips moved faintly. James, I remember. Suddenly, a gunshot rang out. James hit the floor, blood on his arm. A security officer stood at the doorway, weapon raised. Brandon stood up shakily, no longer docile, and for the first time, with rage in his eyes. He charged the guard, overpowering him with a strength James hadn't seen since before the fire. But as James tried to rise, a syringe pierced his neck from behind. He collapsed. Brandon turned just in time to see James being dragged out of the room by 2 guards in black suits. He screamed, James! And on the overhead speaker, Martin's voice returned, the asset was always you, Brandon, but he's your weakness. So now, you'll finish what we started. Brandon stood in the cold corridor, the body of the unconscious guard at his feet. His heart pounded like a war drum. They took James again, but this time, he wouldn't run. He wouldn't hide. He wouldn't freeze. He would fight. Down the hall, the anonymous hacker, still only known by the screen tag Ghost, continued flooding Martin's private servers with truth. All security footage was now live across multiple platforms. Surveillance, medical logs, test results. Brandon's file. Public outcry had already begun. Zoe and Leo watched from Zoe's car parked across from Blackridge Compound. People are seeing this, Leo said, voice shaking. We're finally being heard. But Zoe wasn't smiling. Not yet. Not until James and Brandon are free. Inside his private surveillance suite, Martin Delacroix stared at the breaking news on screen, veins bulging. The reporter's voice blared from the monitor. Widespread speculation that former investor Martin Delacroix was behind Project Morpheus, a now uncovered program to create human compliance subjects using neurotech. Martin turned to his assistant. Where are they? We lost visuals on subjects, then deployed Override Unit K. The assistant blinked. Sir, that's still in testing. Martin slammed his fist on the table. Do it. Brandon darted through the halls with practiced precision. He memorized the layout during his own imprisonment. He bypassed motion sensors, disabled 2 guards, found the back elevator. Each step took him closer to the lower ring, where James was likely being held. And then he saw it, a nameplate on a titanium vault door. Neural resynthesis, stage 2 initiated. Inside, he could hear James moaning. Brandon touched the panel, ready to break it open. When he heard footsteps, heavy, mechanical, the air went cold. Then out of the shadows stepped a figure wearing a reinforced vest, thin wires spiraling from his neck to his forearms. At first, Brandon thought it was a guard, but then the man turned. Same face, same eyes, a version of Brandon. Older, stronger, dead in the eyes. A synthetic voice spoke through him. Subject 5, override Unit K online. Objective, neutralize rogue template. Brandon backed up. You're not me. But the clone didn't blink. I'm what you should have been. They clashed like titans in the corridor. Brandon ducked the first strike, a crushing blow that cracked the wall behind him. He countered with precision, memory, and instinct flooding back. Fished elbow, knee. But override Unit K didn't flinch. Pain didn't register. The fight was never about strength. It was about will. I remember, Brandon shouted. I feel. The clone paused for a split second, enough time for Brandon to grab a defibrillator cable from the wall and slam it into his chest. Electricity surged. Override Unit K collapsed, twitching. Brandon stumbled into the chamber and found James strapped down, barely conscious. The pulse reader on his chest was spiking erratically. James, it's me. James turned weakly. They tried to rewrite me, wipe everything. Brandon unhooked the restraints. You're safe now. James blinked. No, we're not. Outside, Zoe and Leo breached the compound's outer gate using emergency override codes pulled from Ghost's files. Inside the mainframe room, they uploaded the final proof set, including Martin's personal emails, buyer contracts, and experimental data. Zoe pressed send. It's done. But Leo stared at the alert on the screen. Incoming transmission, priority red. Activation code, echo null. What's that? He asked. The message opened and revealed a video message left by Martin, pre-recorded. If you're watching this, it means they've escaped. But let's see what happens when they learn that Subject 6 was never the original. Back in the lab, Brandon helped James to his feet. But James froze. His eyes locked on a blinking file on the chamber wall screen. Archived ID, Subject 0, original DNA source. Brandon, curious, tapped it open. A hologram flickered to life.
A younger version of Brandon.
Healthier, unscarred, crying in a hospital bed. A woman sobbing, trying to hold him. The voiceover said, Subject 0 reclassified after maternal extraction, template fragmented, partial memory re-implanted into later test assets, including subject. Brandon's hands trembled. That's not me. James whispered, you weren't just copied. The screen updated. True origin source, James William Hart. Brandon stepped back. No. The room was eerily silent as the flickering hologram faded. Brandon stood frozen, eyes wide, chest heaving. James clutched his side, weak from the earlier injection but alert. Say something, Brandon whispered. James's voice cracked. I didn't know. Brandon turned sharply. But you did create the chip, the tech, the system. Yes, but I never authorized this. Brandon stepped closer. So I'm just a byproduct of your ambition. James didn't answer, because he wasn't sure anymore. Years earlier, James sat in a hospital bed post-accident. Martin leaned over him with a clipboard. We want to test recovery applications. You'll be compensated. It's routine. James, desperate, drugged, and grieving, had signed without reading. He didn't know that neural sampling meant DNA mapping. He didn't know that compliance testing meant life. And he had no idea that one signature would create Brandon. You said you saw me as a son, Brandon muttered. I meant it, James whispered. Then what am I now? A test? A glitch? A ghost of your regrets? James tried to steady his voice. You're real, and you're more than anything they made you from. Brandon's eyes welled. Then why do I feel like every part of me was written by someone else? Outside, Zoe's stream hit over 9 million views in less than 12 hours. Hashtag surge. Free subjects. Shu neurally. James, heart exposed. Delacroix. Dan. Zoe stared at her phone. They want answers, she said. From all of us. Leo looked up from his laptop. And Martin's gone dark. No trace. No emails. Just vanished. Zoe's eyes narrowed. Which means he's planning something worse. Inside an underground bunker far from the city, Martin stared at a black market server. Beside him, a final prototype. Young, fragile, female. Subject 7, he said softly. You're the failsafe. She blinked. not quite aware, but listening. Martin uploaded a code to the public blockchain. "If anything happens to me," he muttered, "the world burns." Still reeling, Brandon left the chamber alone. James tried to follow, but collapsed again. Alarms sounded as Brandon breached the emergency stairwell. But guards didn't stop him. They watched him, almost like they expected this. Brandon made it to the roof. Air hit his face. For a moment, he felt free. But then, a sharp sound. A snap. Something hit his neck. He reached up a dart. His vision spun. And as he fell, he saw someone standing over him. A girl. Familiar. Too familiar. She looked like Zoe, but younger. Colder. "Subject 7?" Brandon gasped. The girl tilted her head. "Brother." Brandon awoke strapped to a medical bed. James was there, now shackled too. Across from them stood Martin and She held the controller. Martin smiled faintly. "You wanted to know who you were, Brandon." He pointed to Subject 7. "She's the final model, not just made from James, but from you." Brandon's eyes widened. "Your DNA was refined, corrected, optimized." He stepped forward. "She's not your clone, Brandon. She's your daughter." Brandon stared at the girl in horror, and she said, with no emotion, "Father, protocol, ready." Subject 7 stared down at Brandon with wide, unblinking eyes. Her voice was even, robotic. "Protocol awaiting confirmation, command hierarchy override." Brandon lay strapped to the table, sweat pooling at his temples. James, weak but conscious, turned toward her. "She's just a child." Martin smirked. "She's more than that. She's your improvement, Brandon." Brandon whispered, "No, she's the part of me they tried to strip away and failed." As Subject 7 approached Brandon with the controller, her hand shook. A flicker in her pupils, a tremor in her voice. "Father, initiate or terminate." Brandon saw it. The hesitation, the confusion. It wasn't programming. It was emotion. He softened his voice. "You don't have to hurt anyone. You're not a machine." Martin's voice echoed coldly. "Emotion is an error. Execute the reset." Subject 7's hand hovered over the device. But she didn't press it. She asked almost softly, "Why do I remember a lullaby?" Brandon gasped. "She's remembering." Back at Blackridge Compound's perimeter, Zoe and Leo bypassed the final security lock with the help of Ghost. Zoe checked her watch. "If we don't find them in 10 minutes, the backup purge begins." Leo opened the tablet. "See this? If Subject 7 goes active in combat mode, she's linked to an auto-termination clause. The system kills her if she feels too much." Zoe froze. They wired her heart to be disposable. Leo looked up. "Then she's not just a weapon, she's a trap." Brandon's voice cracked as he spoke. "You're not what they say. You're not what they built. I know it because I feel it when I look at you." Subject 7 blinked. "I was made for silence. You were made in darkness, but you can choose the light." He reached out his hand. "Please." She stepped closer. Martin panicked. "Override code 7 beta red. Initiate reset. Wipe him from her memory." But nothing happened. Subject 7 turned her gaze slowly toward Martin. And for the first time, her voice was her own. "No." She dropped the controller. Tears welled up in her eyes. She fell to her knees beside Brandon, helping undo his restraints. James struggled to rise. "You did it," he whispered. "You reached her." But Brandon shook his head. "No. She reached me." Subject 7 looked up. "What's my name?" Brandon hesitated. "You get to choose it," she thought, then said quietly, "Ilayora, it means light." Martin backed away, reaching for a hidden remote. "You think this is over?" He spat. "She was my masterpiece. She's wired to the entire grid. You take her, the system collapses." James stepped forward. "Then collapse it." Martin pressed the button. The room shook. An emergency alarm sounded. Warning. Neural asynchronization disengaged. Facility purge in T-300 seconds. Subject 7, Ilayora, froze. Brandon turned to her. What did he do? She whispered, "He triggered the relink. If I disconnect, everyone else like me dies." Brandon grabbed her hands. "Then we stay. We find another way." But just then, a steel door burst open. A new figure entered. Masked, armed, Leo and Zoe behind him. "Brandon," Zoe shouted. The masked figure lifted a weapon and pointed it at Ilayora. "Step away. She's the core." Brandon shielded her. "Who are you?" The figure removed his mask. James's eyes widened. No, it was Ghost, and he was Brandon's twin. Ghost stood still, weapon lowered, but ready. Brandon stared at him in stunned silence, chest heaving. "You're me," he whispered. Ghost nodded slowly. "I'm what they started with. You were the insurance." James stepped forward. "You hacked their system, helped us." Ghost replied coldly. "I didn't help you, I helped the project end." Brandon narrowed his eyes. "Then why aim a weapon at my daughter?" "She's not a person," Ghost said flatly. "She's the last tether. And if we don't sever it now, everyone like us dies with her." Overhead, the system's AI blared. "Purge sequence, 90 seconds. Neural cascade failure imminent." Zoe typed rapidly into the backup terminal. "I can stall it, maybe give us 2 extra minutes." But that's it. Eliora clutched her head, kneeling. Her skin flickered, not from pain, but from signal stress. "I can feel them. All of them." Brandon rushed to her side. "She's connected to every subject, every prototype." Ghost's voice was calm. "That's why she has to be shut down." Brandon shouted, "She's not a system." Ghost raised the gun again. "She's a bomb." James looked at Ghost, shaking. "You're the first. Why help destroy what you started?" Ghost's voice was dead. "Because I remember the labs, the silence, the resets. I remember being wiped and rewritten every time I asked why I cried at night." He turned to Brandon. "I was the first success, but they erased the part of me that loved, that felt. You were their second try, the emotional one." Brandon blinked. "So you've been sabotaging the project to erase yourself?" Ghost nodded. "And now, I'll finish it." Brandon stood, arms spread between Eliora and the barrel of Ghost's rifle. "You spent your life trying to kill what they made. But she's what we could be, the piece they couldn't control." "She's fragile," Ghost snapped. "Exactly," Brandon said. "And that's why she matters." Eliora's voice was soft. "I dreamed last night. A beach. A red kite. There was laughter." Ghost flinched. "That wasn't a dream," he whispered. Eliora looked up. "Then what was it?" Ghost's hands trembled. I had the same one." Suddenly, the screen behind them flashed. Martin appeared, bruised, bleeding, but alive via remote transmission. "Touching reunion," he said, "but emotion won't stop what I built." He uploaded a final sequence. "Empathy drain. Override protocol Z." Eliora screamed. The blood dripped from her nose. Zoe shouted, "Her neural link is destabilizing. She won't survive another surge." Brandon turned to Ghost. "She's your sister. Please." The Ghost stared at her. Then, he dropped the gun. Zoe yelled, "If we reroute the command through a clean host, we can collapse the override signal." James asked, "Clean host?" Leo's face fell. "It means someone else takes the neural load." Zoe turned to Brandon and Ghost. "Only one of you can survive it." Ghost whispered, "I was built to take pain." Brandon shook his head. "But she needs me." Eliora's eyes fluttered. "I don't want to lose either of you." Ghost looked at Brandon. "I started this." Brandon looked back. "But I can finish it." They both stepped forward, both willing, both broken. Zoe initiated the transfer sequence. The system asked, "Select host for override absorption." Warning, fatal load threshold exceeded. The timer blinked. 14. Brandon and Ghost looked at each other, and then both stepped into the receiver unit at the same time. The system glitched. "Error, dual entry, conflict detected." James screamed, "No! You'll both die." The room exploded with light. And then, everything went dark. Eliora gasped awake. But only one figure was left standing in the glowing mist, their face hidden by shadow. Eliora whispered, Who are you?" The light dimmed. Smoke curled from the base of the neural receiver pod, and slowly a figure emerged, bloodied, breath ragged, eyes adjusting to the light. Eliora rushed forward. "Dad?" The figure raised his hand. A soft smile formed. "Yes, it's me." But in the silence that followed, the others hesitated. James stared at the man. Something was off. Zoe scanned the survivor. Vitals, normal. Signal pattern stabilized. Neural load absorbed. But when the man spoke again, his voice wavered between two tones, Brandon's warmth and Ghost's precision. "I remember both lives," he said. Eliora stepped back. Then, "Who are you?" He looked at her, eyes darkening. "I don't know. Leo's theory. One mind, two histories." Leo reviewed the system logs. This wasn't just a merge, he explained. The neural sync overloaded the memory partition. His consciousness now holds fragments from both of them. James whispered. So, the Brandon we knew and the ghost we feared. They're sharing a body, Zoe added. But eventually, one identity will assert dominance. That's how the brain stabilizes. Eleonora clutched her chest. So I might lose him again. No one answered. As the survivors worked to escape the now collapsing Blackridge compound, Zoe found a hidden partition buried deep in the drive Ghost left behind. A folder named Seed Protocol. Inside, encrypted blueprints, DNA modifications, future subject iterations. Leo read the summary. This wasn't just about obedience. Zoe narrowed her eyes. This was about inheritance. She turned to James. They weren't building tools, they were building lineages. That night, Eleonora sat beside the survivor, still unnamed, as he stared at his own hands like they were foreign. I remember when you built that sandcastle, he said. She blinked. You weren't there. That was my dream. His expression twisted. But I was there. I can see it. Eleonora's voice cracked. You're not just my dad anymore, are you? He didn't answer. Instead, he stood and walked to the mirror. His reflection didn't quite feel like his own. He whispered, I'm not sure who I'm looking at. The survivors released a final public statement, exposing the full truth of Project Morpheus and its backers. Martin Delacroix's accounts were frozen. He was declared a fugitive. News outlets called James and Brandon heroes. But Eleonora saw the shift in the survivor each day. He moved like Brandon, spoke like Ghost, and sometimes like someone else entirely. One quiet morning, Zoe handed Eleonora a sealed envelope. We found it in Ghost's backup file. It was labeled for you. Eleonora opened it. Inside, a handwritten letter. The first line made her gasp. My name was never Ghost. My real name was Elijah Keller. She read on. If you're reading this, it means I let go. But part of me still exists in the one you call Dad. And soon, he'll begin to change. The lines will blur, and when they do, you must decide if he's safe to keep alive. Tears slid down her cheeks. Because if my code survives, so does the fail-safe. Eleonora looked up at the man she once called Dad, now quietly humming to himself in the kitchen. Then, his hum stopped. And he turned to her, eyes glowing faintly with light. You opened the letter, didn't you? Eleonora's fingers trembled as she held the letter. The words echoed, you must decide if he's safe to keep alive. Across the room, the man she'd once trusted as her father stirred tea in silence. Then, he stopped and turned to her. You opened the letter, didn't you? His voice wasn't cold, but it wasn't entirely Brandon's either. Eleonora nodded slowly. I had to know. He placed the spoon down carefully. I understand. He stepped closer. I feel both men inside me. Brandon's warmth, Ghost's memory. I remember the sound of your laugh and the silence of that lab. Eleonora's eyes filled with tears.
Are you in control?
A long pause. He nodded. For now. But if the failsafe activates, then I might become someone who forgets how to love you. James and Zoe reviewed the final code Ghosts left behind. A dormant command hidden in the neural net. Zoe's voice shook. If triggered, the failsafe won't just erase his emotion. It could wipe everyone still carrying traces of Project Morpheus tech. James closed his eyes. That includes Brandon's memories and Eleonora's chip. So what do we do? Zoe asked. James looked up. We give her the power, we let her choose. That night, Eleonora sat with him on the porch as stars blinked into view. The device in her hand held one button, initiate purge. I don't want to use it, she whispered. He looked at her softly. I know, but I need to know if you'd let me. He took her hand and wrapped it gently around the device. I'd let you, because I trust the person I helped raise, even if she wasn't born the way others were. A tear slid down her cheek. I just wanted to be normal. You are, he said, because you're choosing, and nothing they made ever could. She stared at the button, and then placed the device on the table. I'm not pressing it, she said firmly, not because I'm afraid, but because you're still him. He smiled fully now, like Brandon used to. And you're still mine. They embraced. And in that moment, the system inside him and her responded. Neural tension dropped. The failsafe deactivated, not because of code, but because love made the system obsolete. The world knew everything now. Martin Delacroix had been captured in Morocco, extradited, and sentenced to life for bioethical crimes. The Morpheus subjects, scattered across the globe, were finally receiving real care, advocacy, and voice. Zoe became head of the National Biotech Ethics Council. James returned to mentoring youth in tech. And Eleonora? She built a center called the Lighthouse, a place for anyone who had been created to learn what it meant to choose. One evening, Eleonora walked into the kitchen where he was cooking, the man who was both father, template, and survivor. She hugged him from behind. "You okay?" she asked. He smiled. "I don't always know who I was, but I know who I am now." They sat down to eat. No alarms, no protocol, no fear. Just a family, not by blood, not by design, but by the only thing that mattered: choice. Some people are born into love. Some people are created without it. But the ones who choose love, despite how they were made, are the ones who remake the world. What did this story teach you about identity, second chances, and choosing who you want to be? Have you ever had to forgive something you didn't choose and love something unexpected? Let us know in the comments, and if this journey moved you, like, share, and subscribe. Because Nest Stories doesn't just tell stories, we remind you that healing is never about where you came from. It's about where you decide to go.